Hello and welcome to the Endless Possibilities podcast. I am your host, Gareth Duignam. I am the author of Waking Up from the Dream. And today we're going deep, probably the deepest we've ever gone on this podcast. We're going to talk about the actual stages of Samadhi. So, Samadhi are the states of unity and absorption that traditions point to as proof, the real litmus test of how far awakening has actually unfolded in a human being. If you've ever wondered, how do I really know where I am on this path? This episode is your answer, because Samadhi doesn't lie. Ego can lie. Ego can tell you all sorts of things about where you believe you are, how special you are. But Samadhi doesn't lie. Insights can be partial, even powerful. Openings can be temporary. You know, you can have big openings and you can feel like you've reached really high stages of awakening, but they don't stay open. Samadhi is, for me, the gold standard in spiritual awakening. And what I normally say to people is that when the Samadhi stages start to unfold, then you're really on your path. That's when it's really starting to unfold for you, when you're spontaneously just going into Samadhi. So today we're going to talk about the three main stages in Samadhi. So there's Savakalpa Samadhi, there is Nirvikalpa Samadhi, and then there is Sahaja Samadhi. So I'm also going to bring in something that almost nobody in the Western world is talking about, the Supramental Force. This is what the ancients simply called Sat, which is Sat, Chit, and Ananda, truth, consciousness, and bliss. So the Sat element of consciousness is pure existence, consciousness. And today we're going to talk about that force, or how that force completely changes the game once it starts descending into the body and the world. And then finally we'll touch upon the actual lived state of Brahman consciousness, also known as the Great Awakening. So there are many, many awakenings on the journey. There's self-realization, God consciousness, unity consciousness, but Brahman is known as the Great Awakening. And then we'll also touch on Para-Brahman as the final stage that very few ever stabilize in while still being in the human body and walking around in a fully lived state. So I've gone through all of the stages for about 10 years. It's been about 10 years since my first awakening, 2016. And it took about 5 years for me to kind of go through, what they call self-realization, God consciousness, unity consciousness. Brahman happened about 5 years ago for me. So let's jump into it. I'll be sharing what happens in these stages from my own direct experience, what it feels like, the traps that one might experience at each level.
Welcome to the Endless Possibilities podcast, where the journey of spiritual awakening and energy healing unfolds.
Let's begin. Okay, so firstly, what is Samadhi in plain English? There's lots of Sanskrit words. I'm not versed in these. I don't use that kind of language. I will call them by their Sanskrit names, but I'll use the most simple language to describe it. I try and keep things as simple as possible. I use language and wording that makes sense to me and is just the most simple for people to understand. So Samadhi in plain English it's when the normal sense of me, the thinker, the doer, the feeler, I am my mind, I am my thoughts, I am my emotions, I am my body, I am everything that I believe I have been told. And samadhi completely dissolves that into pure awareness, pure being. You could also say pure love, depending on the doorway, right? Which type of samadhi, right? And what happens is there is no more subject object split, right? There's no experiencer here and I am perceiving something out there. So there's no more subject object. You and the universe or consciousness just become one, right? There's no experience of time. So time stops. Thoughts can stop, but sometimes they can be there, right? And I'll explain this. So stage one, uh, and I'm going to use my own experience of samadhi, and how they started to unfold. I had no context. I had no framework when this started happening to me. It just started happening, and I was like, "Oh my God, this is amazing." So afterwards, I learned, the Sanskrit names, and I kind of, looked them up and read all about them, and I could go, wow, this is what's happening to me. So the first one that started to unfold for me was Savakalpa Samadhi. And what that means in Sanskrit, it just means with seed or with fluctuation, right? So this is the first time most serious meditators or energy workers taste the real thing, right? You can be meditating for years. You can have a really, really quiet mind. You can sit and be in peace. You can have a sense of oneness, but samadhi is something different. So imagine that you're sitting in meditation, or maybe in one of my retreats, and after 3 or 4 days of the transmissions, suddenly, and I've seen this happen, right? Yeah, on the last retreat, we would get up for the breaks, for lunch, for dinner, and some of the people just wouldn't get up. They would just sit there, fully absorbed. So imagine this is you, right? You're sitting on the retreat, you are in meditation, and all of a sudden you just disappear, right? Uh, Maybe you come around, you open your eyes, and everybody has left. So you feel what's happening is, right, you're in the meditative state. You feel yourself expanding into infinite space. There might be a golden light or total blackness that's somehow alive, or waves of liquid moving through the top of the head down into the chest. There's still a very subtle sense of a witness, a tiny sense of I that is watching this incredible state to start to unfold, right? So there's still an experiencer of what's happening. And that subtle seed of I, or I-ness, is still there. That's why it's called Savakalpa. it feels it feels absolutely mind-blowing for the first time. So a lot of people, when it first happens to them, they're just like, what was that? Right? Mind blown. Some people laugh. They just, they can't get over what happened. Where did I go? This was incredible. And I can remember my first time experiencing this state. I was actually on a retreat. It was outside of the actual meditation. We weren't actually in the hall meditating. I was outside in a foyer. I could hear there was a kitchen close by. People were being served food. I could hear the clanking of plates and cutlery. And I just noticed that my awareness was just being pulled into what felt like golden honey. It was really beautiful. My mind was still there, so I could hear, I could experience, I could feel the unity with this state. I could feel the bliss, the absorption. I could hear, I could think about it. I could open my eyes and look around and then close my eyes and go back into the state. And I was being held, been really, really held in that state. But it wasn't a stable state yet. So when you come out of it, maybe the phone buzzes, or you remember the body is telling you you're hungry, you have to get up. The state collapses and the ordinary mind can come back in. So it's kind of like when that happens, it's like, wow, I want to be there forever. I don't ever want to come out of this. This is amazing. And it kind of feels a little bit devastating when you do come out and you're back in the real world. So most spiritual traditions stop here and call Savakalpa the goal, but it's not. It's just a doorway. So after my retreat, I noticed that these two stages of samadhi started to happen for me on a daily basis. So Savakalpa Samadhi started to happen. I would meditate 3 times a day. So I would get up in the morning, maybe 6 a.m., meditate for 90 minutes. I would come home in the afternoon. I would do another hour meditation. And then before bed, I would do another 90 minutes. But I also had the descent of samadhi coming into my system and pulling me into meditation at just random times during the day. And what was happening was I would be in work and I would feel this sort of like energy sitting on the top of my head. My eyes would feel like I was, the eyelids would become heavy, almost like meditation was coming from me, not the way it previously was, where I was sitting having a meditation practice, trying to get into a state. It felt like me, the individual, trying to have a meditation practice, trying to have a quiet mind, trying to take away all of the everyday activities that were blocking the meditation. So meditating, quietening my mind, being in a quiet place, getting the body comfortable, was me trying to get into the meditative state. Whereas when the samadhi stage started to happen, it felt like what I was trying to get into was now reaching in, trying to pull me into it. So it was very, very different. So the second stage that started to unfold was Nirvikalpa Samadhi. And Nirvikalpa means without fluctuation, no seed, no witness. So there's no experience. So people like Ramana Maharishi and Nisargadatta Maharaj lived in this state. They weren't in self-realization. A lot of people, they think that Ramana and Nisargadatta Maharaj were just talking about self-realization. They really weren't. They were in Nirvikalpa Samadhi. So in Nirvikalpa, what happens is that the last trace of an observer dissolves. There's literally no center point left, right? So in the previous stages of awakening, there's, in unity consciousness, let's say, there is an I am one with everything, right? There's unity. I am one. This is my creation, my enlightenment. I feel like I'm connected to everything, right? And it's beautiful and it's amazing and it feels like you've won the spiritual lottery, but it's not the end. There's more. So what happens in Nirvikalpa is that the last trace of the observer dissolves. There's literally no there's no one home, right? There's no inside, there's no outside, there's no experiencer, there's no experience, just pure being. Many people describe it as an absolute stillness, absolute silence, yet infinitely alive. It's literally like in Savakalpa, you dive into the ocean, right? I'm just going to use that metaphor as the ocean, and your awareness is like a little droplet of that ocean, right? So at the center of your being, you are a droplet of the absolute. And in Savakalpa Samadhi, you're diving into the ocean and you are having the experience like a diver would, in, who goes in, and you're seeing, you can hear, you can feel the different waves, the movement of the water. So you're an experiencer having the experience of the ocean or the absolute. But in Nirvikalpa, it's almost like the diver becomes the ocean, right? So it's just the ocean. It's even difficult to say that there's an experience because you just become it, and you as the individual don't have much of a recall. For me, I would feel like I would disappear, completely disappear into it, become one with it, and the experiencer would just dissolve. Some people say it's like being the screen on which the movie of life was playing, except now the movie is gone and only the screen remains. And this is the really amazing part, right? The body can sit like this for hours, even like some people days. A lot of the old yogis would go into samadhi and literally be gone for days on end. And what that might look like, if you are on the outside looking at a person who's in samadhi, you might notice that the breathing or the breath almost stops. The heart rate might drop dramatically. uh, you might actually even look like you've become a living statue, right? And some people report that the body gets cold. I think what happens is the blood pressure drops, the heart rate drops. Um, yeah. And when you come out of Nirvikalpa, the ego is being burnt, right? It's like while you're there, the ego is being dissolved in that state. And it kind of feels like it's a dream that you're coming back into. When you're coming back into the world, it's like, oh, I'm okay. Where have I been? And everything kind of comes back. It's like, oh, I'm back in an objective reality. Where have I been for the last hour or 2 hours? And Nirvikalpa is kind of also still a state, right? It's not. It hasn't become permanent. It's not yet the final stability. It's something that you're going into, you're coming back. It's like you're getting to the edge, you're kind of merging into it, but you're then coming back into your everyday waking state. But what's happening in the meantime is it's burning up ego. You're kind of getting closer and closer to a merger with it. So for me, this was happening daily. So I would go into Savakalpa daily and Nirvikalpa daily, every day. And it happened for, I would say, about 3 or 4 months. So it's still not the final state. You can still fall out of it if the old conditioning is triggered hard enough, right? People can trigger you. You can get into an argument. So whatever happens, and I've seen it happening with people. Uh, yeah, just life triggers them. Maybe something out of the ordinary happens. There's an accident or something, something happens to somebody. They're no longer in Nirvikalpa Samadhi. They're back in the human conditioned mind, freaking out. Okay, so now here's where most of the maps end, but there is a third stage that almost no one in the West really talks about. You will not find much on it. You will not find many people talking about Sahaja Samadhi on YouTube. Sahaja means the natural state, spontaneous, always on. So this is Nirvikalpa Samadhi that never leaves. Even when you're out doing the shopping, arguing with your partner, scrolling on your phone, when you're in work, the silence, the oneness, the infinite space is the ground now. So Savakalpa and Nirvikalpa become a permanent state. I just woke up one day and I knew that this was it. I had broken through, and this was my everyday lived state. The silence, the oneness, the infinite space is the ground now, not a state you enter. The world appears inside it. I always like to use the blue sky. So the world kind of feels like it's the clouds moving through that blue sky, and you as the experiencer, you just let it move by, right? The sky doesn't get involved. It doesn't stop the clouds. It doesn't go, I don't want the dark clouds. I only want the white clouds. Everything happens. Everything moves across the blue sky. Actions happen, words happen, thoughts happen, but they're all made of the same silence. There's no one doing them. What also this might feel like is that, let's just say you have preferences, right? It's like you have objects, and this object has more preference over this object. You just see everything as consciousness. There's nothing, it just, I don't know how to explain it. It's like you just see everything, a piece of gold and a stick, as not different, right? They're the same. It's all made from the same essence. It's only the human conditioned mind that says this is worth more than that. And yeah, it changes. So everything is just made from consciousness or silence. There is no one there to say that this is more valuable than that, right? It's just you see everything as what it is. And I'm going to use, this is what Ramana called the natural state. This is where I've been living, and what many of you who've done the deep work with me are either tasting or starting to stabilize in. And here's the part that's going to blow some minds. Sahaja is still not the absolute final stage. It's the final stage for the individual soul, but there's something beyond even that. Okay, so I'm going to introduce you to the concept of the supramental, or sat. And this is the energy that I work with quite a lot online and on my retreats. This is what the ancients simply called sat, right? And Sanskrit, that's Sanskrit for truth. It's the highest truth, really, right? Up until Sahaja, awakening is mostly vertical, going up and out, and formlessness, right? Beautiful, infinite, peaceful, but the body and the world are still experienced as somewhat less real. When the supramental force begins to descend, really, really starts to descend, everything starts to flip. That same infinite silence starts transforming matter itself. The cells in the body start vibrating at a different frequency. The body becomes lighter, more transparent. Emotional wounds that you thought were gone forever start to get stirred up, flushed out. Psychic abilities can start to open up. The world starts looking luminous. It literally feels like it's glowing from the inside. And this force is not content with escape. So it's not about you becoming enlightened and not having to deal with the world, right? It's about transforming life, not abandoning it, not escaping humanity. So in my own unfoldment, the full descent of the supramental started around 2019. I was already stabilized in Sahaja, but suddenly there was this kind of flow of descending energy through the crown, rewiring my nervous system. For months, I could function, but I had this, what I would call pure divinity. It felt like a luminous platinum liquid energy started to flow into the top of my head. And what was happening was I was starting to shift into Brahman consciousness. And Brahman consciousness is the recognition of Brahman, right? So Brahman, basically, it's not the individual having an experience of Brahman. It's literally that the soul gets pulled into Brahman, and Brahman is non-existence, and you literally become it as a living state, not just in meditation, uh, all day, every day. Brahman consciousness is the great awakening, the direct knowing that everything, literally everything, is that. It is nothingness, and everything that you perceive is being projected on the screen of nothingness, Brahman. So literally everything, a tree, a coffee cup, your own body, it's all part of one appearing as many. And even beyond that, para-Brahman, the absolute, beyond all qualities, beyond even existence and non-existence, and very, very few people actually stabilize here ever. It's total dissolution, no center, no edges, no world, no God, just the unnameable, right? And I've spoke about it a few times. I remember the first time um, I had been going into Nirvikalpa Samadhi and Savakalpa Samadhi, and then one evening I sat down to meditate, and it was like a black abyss just opened up in front of me, and this terror just rose up through the gut. But something in me knew that I had to go into this blackness, and it was like falling into a black hole. And the feeling that I had at the time was that it wasn't that I was going to die, or it was the death process, but it felt like I was going to be erased, somehow deleted from the server. There was nothing. There was no heaven. There was no hell. There was no afterlife. There was no astral. I was gone. And when I went in there, all experience just ceased. And I don't know how long, but this wasn't the same as Nirvikalpa Samadhi. This was me being thrown into Brahman. This was my soul being pulled into Brahman, and I came out of it about 90 minutes later or 2 hours later, and just as I was coming out of it, there was that fear came back. It was like, oh my God, what was that? Whatever that was, I do not want to go back there. It terrified me. Um, I didn't know what it was. I had never talked to anybody about this state of Brahman. Yeah, so, okay, so why do I say that Samadhi is the ultimate litmus test? Okay, so during your awakening, anyone can have insights. Anyone can have psychic, visions. They can have an understanding of non-duality. Anyone can quote scriptures. Anyone can listen to YouTube, different teachers, and they can have like concepts of it. They can have their own awakenings, right? But are they fully abiding? Are they lived? Some of them can, but in samadhi, it just can't be faked. The nervous system either holds the frequency or it doesn't, right? So when you're in Savakalpa, you know it, right? It's not, oh, I think I'm there. You're just in it. When Nirvikalpa hits, you just can't deny it. You've just disappeared. You've just entered into blackness. And then when Sahaja becomes your normal 24/7, there's just no doubt. You're there living it. I've come across a lot of teachers who claim, full enlightenment, if there is such a thing as full enlightenment. But the minute, real life pressure hits them, the samadhi state collapses, and they're back freaking out, worrying. That stage just isn't there. So if you are listening in or you're watching and you've been having glimpses, that's really, really amazing, right? That's the invitation, right? Is to be in the samadhi. I want people who come on my retreats to leave and for that samadhi state to start unfolding for them when they go home. Yeah. Keep going. You're on the right track. We are living in very extraordinary times with the descent of the Supramental Force descending onto the planet, with spiritual seekers having more access to these energies through technology, meeting on Zoom. More and more human beings are being able to be touched by this incredible energy right now than at any other point in recorded history or any other stage. Your only job is to get out of the way and let it burn through everything that is not it. If you enjoyed this episode, I encourage you to go deeper. You can connect with me on my website, truespiritualawakening.eu. You can find my book, Waking Up from the Dream, on Amazon. This maps out the awakening process, the different stages that I went through. There is a transmission in the book. You can read it and actually start to connect to that Supramental Force. Yeah, we've had a great time today. I loved connecting with you. If you want to learn more about this state, if you want to have a direct experience, start joining my Zoom meditations. They're free. I offer them every Tuesday and Friday, 9 p.m. UK time. I'll put a link down below, or you can find them on my website. I'm going to see you there soon. Thank you, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.
This has been the Endless Possibilities Podcast, where the journey of spiritual awakening and energy healing unfolds. Gareth is a lifelong seeker of truth, a spiritual teacher and author, and it's his passion to delve into the profound world of consciousness. We hope you've enjoyed the show, and we hope you've gotten something from it. If you did, make sure to like, rate, and review. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, the podcast is available on YouTube and all the major podcasting platforms. Find us on Instagram at _mother_force. Take care, and we'll see you soon on the Endless Possibilities Podcast.